Thank you for joining NAA's daily micro webinar series. My name is Stephanie Anderson, and I am the Industry Operations Manager here at the National Apartment Association. In an effort to provide our membership with timely operational guidance amid COVID-19, we are producing daily updates in the form of micro webinars. Each day, we will focus on a different topic relevant to the apartment industry. At this time, I would like to take a moment to direct your attention to the screen. Please review our disclaimer. Today is part 3 of our 4-part series on how reopening the economy impacts multifamily management. Leading this great conversation on such an important and timely topic is Rich George, president of the NAA Coach. He is joined by Doug Chasik, president of the Apartment Doctor, who will be assisting and moderating today's presentation. Both speakers are longtime multifamily industry veterans, sought-after national speakers, and well-respected educators. Today's conversation will focus on stage 2, management and operational changes. Rich, welcome back, and thank you for being here today.
Thanks for having us back, Stephanie. You know, I'm grateful that we were able to do the 2 previous days here, and I'm looking forward to wrapping it up today and tomorrow. I'm very much enjoying this process. Thanks for having us. And welcome, Doug, as our moderator.
Thanks, Rich, and thanks, Stephanie. Welcome, everybody. Rich, as we progress along, we're now at stage 2. What are we considering?
You know, I think that we're looking at management and operational changes. This is where, like I said, this may run concurrent. If you watch the first 2 of these sessions, they may run concurrent a little bit with the safety in stage 1. But as we move into stage 2, we have to be thinking about how are we going to move forward and protect our employees, protect ourselves, but also protect our owners, our revenue streams, and what are we going to do differently now in this new economy? Because this economy is going to be changed for a while. You know, I keep watching the spin doctors on television talking about what's going to happen with this economy, and you know, the thought process is going to look like a check mark. We're going to fall down and then we're going to shoot up. I think that's a great thing. If anything, I think it might be like a check mark, but there's going to be a flat bottom to that check mark, and that could represent the rest of this year into next year. So we have to really be prepared for that.
So sounds like what's going to be on the table are our workflows, and which workflows should be first as we consider this brave new world.
First, we have to look at our sick leaves, our adjustments to those policies. Now, we've been required statutorily in some areas and nationally to pay workers, whether they had paid time off or not. But I think we just have to look at sick leave in general differently than we once did. Many of us have moved to this PTO, paid time off. We stopped calling it sick leave. And I'm not suggesting we should move away from that, but we need people to not think of that time as, I'm going to come to work when I've got a sniffle, or I'm going to come to work when I've got a cough, because I want to save those for December so I can go Christmas shopping, right? That's the way we've looked at those policies. We really need, if people are not feeling well, we need them to stay home. And we don't need pay to be a barrier. I don't know what those changes are going to look like, but this is something, remember we talked about, there needs to be that task force or that work group. They really need to be looking at how's an effective way to do this that incentivizes the right behaviors. You know, I think another policies that we need to be looking at, and having been paying attention to some of these micro webinars and also the full-length webinars that NAA has been doing in combination with Grace Hill and Visto, I think that there's some great information out there about the touchless tours and all of this technology that our industry has been building us towards for the last couple of decades. You know, we're automating rent payments, we're automating tours, we're automating all kinds of things. And for months, years, really not months, it's years, I've been watching in the social spaces, our ground level employees that are complaining about, are we all going to be replaced by iPads? Are we going to be replaced by, you know, I think you and I were talking about it, Doug, the drones that are taking on people on tours, and, you know, these kinds of things, are they going to replace us? We're never going to be replaced. However, we can be enhanced. We can be made better. So we really need to do that. For those of you that know me, you know I'm an operations guy, so I'm going to stay out of that leasing realm. There are a lot of great industry consultants, speakers, and people that can do that.
All too often, the government steps in when we don't move fast enough or in the direction that the horse is going in. And you mentioned sick pay. I'm seeing a lot of jurisdictions where they have taken that decision away from us and said, we're going to pay people, which, you know, I want to be sensitive to the bottom line. However, like you said, I don't want somebody coming to work because they can't afford not to come to work. In that same vein, what are we going to do about rent collections?
You know, it's definitely something that we have to be thoughtful of. And as I've been working with my clients, and Doug, I know you and I talked about this when you're working with your clients, and they're talking about this. I know one of these micro webinars a couple of days ago, Jay Turner gave some great statistics about you know, what people are actually seeing with the April rent, and they're going to continue to carry that into May, and that information is going to be available. I believe the statistic, and I hope I'm quoting this right, was most people saw about a 13% tear off in or increase in their collections in April, which was lower than what most people thought it would be. However, May's going to be a completely different animal. I mean, we're right here on the cusp of collecting May rent, and it could get worse. What I know is this, and Doug, feel free to add into this, but I believe that we have to look at this as a case-by-case approach, because I look at my own personal tenants in my buildings. I've got, you know, I'm an independent rental owner, and in my buildings, I look at each individual tenant. And when I've had conversations with them, some people, their revenue's not been impacted at all. Some of them, they've been laid off or they've been furloughed. However, when we look at what they've been furloughed and what they are getting or about to get in unemployment benefits and the stimulus, they still have the same ability to pay. So I think that, and then there are going to be others that truly don't. And I recognize that, you know, as the NOI coach, I'm the, you know, anybody that, again, that knows me knows that I'm not about leaving a penny on the table, man. I will get every late fee, and, you know, but we have to abate those things. We have to look at these repayment plans. But what I know, and what everybody listening to this knows, that if people don't pay the rent for 2 or 3 months and then they try to catch up in July or August, we're going to have a lot of failures. So it's incumbent upon us to sit down with people one by one, and not face to face, or if we do, 6 feet apart, but talk with people about truly how has this impacted you. Doug, what do you have to add to that? Because I think you've got some great perspective on this.
Well, thanks. And I don't want to go too deep into the fair housing aspect of this, but just like you're looking at ops, I'm looking at fair housing, and I am covering this in the webinar series that I'm currently doing with NAA and Grace Hill. So people can go to the NAA website and see the links for those. Currently, they're complimentary. I think the bottom line here, no pun intended, is to consider the situation and not the person. Yes, I agree wholeheartedly that it's got to be a unique conversation. However, the conversation has got to center on the circumstances and situation the person's in, and not the person. Here in Florida, I am ashamed to say that after a month, the number I heard this morning, 8% of people who have applied for unemployment are receiving it. That's horrible. And how do we then take the hard line with a resident? And while I agree that most people who go into their 3rd month in a stipulation or a payment plan aren't successful, you know what? That's what used to happen under that model. As you've been describing so well, we are in a whole new model. And I think it's incumbent upon us to consider the circumstances. Some areas of the country are not feeling the pain. Other areas of the country are screaming in torment. And depending on where your assets are located, you're going to have to work things out based on your residents and what their particular situation is. So that's my advice. Work on the situation and circumstances, not the individual who's experiencing them.
You know, Doug, and that's a perfect segue to the next topic is we have to really look at the impact on our resident profile. You know, we've got all kinds of great profile data on our properties, and, you know, many of us have things like preferred employers. I personally live in Detroit. You know, when we talk about preferred employers, we've got the automotive sector, and when it suffers, we all suffer. Doug, you and I did a radio show yesterday in Houston, and, you know, the impact that they're getting because of the oil industry. We have to look at how that's going to impact us, because that's going to be much longer lasting than just these temporary employees, or the employees that are going to be going back to work in a couple of weeks. You know, my wife personally works for the automotive industry. She's a senior engineering manager. She's been able to work from home and be productive, but that's got a limit. You know, it's not going to be forever. You can't do this forever. So you really need to be looking at, as leadership, as task force, look at each individual property, look at their resident profile, and then look at each individual resident. And that's the only way we're going to be successful with this. You know, I think that leads us right to talking about lease renewals. You know, we have to seek balance here. We have to seek stability. This is for the first time that you know, I know a lot of you that have maybe seen me speak about lease renewal management, whether it be in CAM or CAPS classes or at conferences. You know, it's all about when our leases are expiring, and you know, the yield management software is brilliant at doing this for us. But this is where we may have to break away and say, you know what, we need to prioritize stability over today's dollar. And that's going to impact us for the length of and term of leases. And we maybe need to be considering letting people lock in at a longer rate, those people that prove that they're good for that. What do you think about that, Doug? Because I think you also have some great perspective about that.
Well, we always used to talk about how a resident who's delinquent is basically a vacancy that you can't lease. Now the question becomes, who are you going to lease to? So I think residential is going to follow commercial, where there's lease modifications, where there's extensions, where we're taking balances and spreading them out, where we're postponing rent increases. There's almost a blank slate for creativity in terms of saving the current resident. Looking at their current situation, what is the prospect for their getting back to a regular schedule of rent payments, getting their job back? It's so sad. It is heart-wrenching, not to be melodramatic. Every day, just locally here on the island, another business, they're not going to reopen. And where do those people go? And what happens to that part of the community? So we've got to be really, you know, you've heard me forever talk about that all NOI is local. I don't think it's been truer at any time than it is now. Well, who is your market? Who is your profile? How are you going to save the people worth saving? And to be blunt, legally rid yourself of the people who aren't savable, and in a compassionate, humane way, making sure they're not on the street to the best of your ability, but being, you know, at some point, we're going to have to be refocused on our primary job, which is maintain and enhance the value of the asset.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You know, and at the end of it all, you know, we're talking about management and operational changes. You know, we have to step back to safety from a management and operational standpoint. We have to have zero tolerance for our employees, our residents, our contractors, our vendors, anybody that's doing things stupidly. There's no other way to say it. You know, saying I'm not going to wear a mask, I'm not going to wear the gloves, it's all right. We just can't tolerate that.
How do you lead people through? How do you lead people? Because signs and policies only go so far.
Right.
What do we do as leaders?
You know, Doug, that leads us to that scheduling this deferred maintenance, because most of our reactions has been we've stopped doing service requests unless they are an emergency. And I think that's the right reaction. But at some point in time, We have to get back to that. We have to figure that out. I was talking with one of my clients in Ohio, Todd Hignite, great guy, and he was talking about what his company is doing. And they are now taking service requests and they're doing their best to let people know that this is an emergency request, we're going to take care of it. This is an essential request, so that's going to get priority, or this is non-essential. You know, again, the essential, non-essential words are a little bit convoluted, but I think it's important that people understand that we have to abandon those original, you know, first in, first out policies. You know, Doug, you being the fair housing expert, you know, you very much preach that you have to do them in the order that in which they were received. Now we have to look at that, at least for the temporary, until we can get back to where we can go back to first in, first out.
Well, it's interesting that, as is the case with many things, we were already evolving first in, first out to first in, first out with priority. In other words, if I'm paying for the water and you've got a water leak and you call in after somebody who's got a torn screen, guess who's getting priority? You are. The key is communicating to everybody so that they know exactly what you're doing. This brings up a whole other area of focus in terms of, first of all, how many of our staff, how many of our employees are going to make it through this? Unfortunately, some people are sick. Some people who have been furloughed have had to go out and find some other work. So what's going to be our staff in terms of being able to catch up with what has been estimated to be 40, 50, even 60% of ordinary service requests have been deferred, and now they're going to come back to us in this big lump. Okay, well, I'll go out and get a contractor. How many of your contractors are fully staffed? How many of your contractors have the bandwidth? We've got to be planning now, as these governors are mandating that we're going to reopen this and reopen that. If we're not in sync with that, we could find ourselves understaffed and without contractors to go do that work. And that obviously is going to impact payment. It's going to impact renewals, and it's going to leave a lot of folks really unhappy. It seems people have a relatively short span of patience for this entire thing. It's quite amazing.
And I don't know about you, but it seems like that the longer we stay in quarantine, that span of patience is evaporating. I'm seeing people just getting so, you know, hot over minimal things. You know, it's something else that we need to, it is all about the revenues. You brought up payments, Doug. We have to seek easier payment options. Again, something we've been doing for the last 10 years. We've been making it easier to pay with credit cards and various ACH and various other ways. We need to continue down that path to the point that I've got two of my clients that they mandate that they get electronic payments. It's no longer an option to give a check. And that was long before this, and they are positioned much better than their competitors. Because, you know, at the end of the day, we have to be able to forecast that cash flow, which is going to be tough. But as investment managers, it's what our owners need. And they need that feeling of calm from us. They ask us questions and they expect us to give them absolute answers. And what we need to give are absolutely confident answers that we're going to be doing the best that we can, and that we are going to find that cash flow. You know, for years, as an industry, we have sought to beat up our expenses to find NOI on the expense side. And I've been beating the drum for the past 15 years, find that NOI through revenue. Now's the point where we can't do it through revenue. We need to do it through expenses. And we need to be listening. I was talking this morning with a good friend of mine who owns a company that does water conservation, Paul Marks, great guy. And he's like, this is a great time for my customers to send me the things that I can do the analysis, because I might be able to get them to recover their NOI when they can't get the cash flow. I'm like, Paul, you know, you're preaching to the choir here, buddy. But that as operators, we need to be thinking about what are these things that we can do to overcome. You know, it's that rob Peter to pay Paul kind of thing, right?
Okay, so final question. What should we focus on? What do we need to be looking at to achieve that balance where we are maximizing NOI to the best of our ability? However, we're also not denigrating the customer experience to where they feel like, you know what, ever since this thing happened, I'm getting less and less, I'm out of here. How do you find that place where you're balancing those two priorities?
That's a great question. That's a really great question that you kind of stumped me, other than really going back to this same mantra that we've been talking about in the previous two sessions, and I guarantee you we'll talk about it again tomorrow. We have to avoid the negligence. That balance, that's our job. That's our obligation. This whole section, this could have been so much longer. We could have talked about so many different disciplines within property management and multifamily management. But, the whole point of these series is to get those people that are going to be the thought leaders in your company, that task force or that reopening work group, to give them something to think about, because it's going to go so much further than this. It's going to go beyond this.
And I certainly didn't mean to stump you. Rather, I'm convinced that executing the program that you've outlined with empathy and compassion will allow us to get to that balance point.
Absolutely. And, like I always say to people, in this world, if you're in a submarket that's got 10,000 apartment homes and only 8,000 renters, all things being equal, we should all be 80% occupied, right? But we live in a world where all things aren't equal. All we have to be is better than the guy down the street. So those that do this, that lean into this, and they do it better than the others, they're going to emerge out of this winning, because you know what? Multifamily investments are winners. They always are. They always are.
I don't know why you reminded me, but you reminded me of the old joke. I don't have to run faster than the bear. I only have to run faster than you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So Doug, it's been a pleasure doing this segment with you. Look forward to tomorrow. Stephanie, thank you again for having us. We look forward to wrapping this up in this 4-part series tomorrow.
Thank you so much, Rich and Doug. The pleasure has been all mine. I really appreciate you all being here once again today and sharing your expert knowledge with all of our members. We do invite everyone tomorrow to come back for the final part of our 4-part series on reopening the economy. So don't miss out. Tomorrow, be here. And for more information related to COVID-19, we do invite you to view our coronavirus resources and guidance page at naahq.org. Thank you so much, and we look forward to seeing you again tomorrow.